Hi, Professor Stott and the rest of English 301. My name is Amanda Shaw, and this is week one, and the topic is limitations of common sense. So, that being said, I want to break down what different limitations can be, but first, before even doing that, I want to talk about what common sense actually is. So, when I think of common sense, I think of something that is known by most people, that is accepted by most people. So, that would be the kind of common thing. But that being said, what's common to one person may not necessarily be common to another. So, that's where the limitations part comes in. So, the first one I want to talk about is cultural limitations. So, with culture, that could be your background, how you're brought up, that could be your religion, anything of the sort. So, with that being said, say you come from a culture that is, let's say, Asian. So, it's common sense for somebody from that descent that and from that background that when walking into a household you would take off your shoes, or walking into a school you would take off your shoes with a sign of respect, or you bow down to your elders, and they're very big on respect. That's common sense for them. In America, you wouldn't necessarily see a child going to school and taking off their shoes. So that's where there's a limitation, and different backgrounds and cultures have different things that are necessarily common sense as opposed to others. So that's just one type of example of a cultural limitation. There's, of course, many more, but I thought that one kind of fit perfectly. So your culture, how you're brought up, your background, all things like that. Second being exposure. So what you're exposed to, whether you live in an area that's more alienated, like say a rural area, can be things maybe different, more common sense when it comes to that versus a suburban area or an urban area. That being said, if you wanted to compare it to literature, if you take a lot of like Nathaniel Hawthorne's tales, he deals a lot with like alienation, whether it be like Sleepy Hollow or um, any really of his tales that are in um, his collection pretty much deal with alienation and being away for 10 years. So that's kind of like a literature perspective, but for people, it's more so like, what are you exposed to? What do you necessarily see around you? So if you're in a rural area, you may not be as exposed to much. Or a perfect example, if you were living in an Amish community, you're not exposed to, say, things like technology or things like that as compared to living in like an urban area. So when it comes to common sense and exposure wise, say it's common sense in, I don't know, New York City that jaywalking is pretty much accepted. I'm from New York, and jaywalking is probably the biggest thing. That's common sense that usually cars would have stopped for you, called it, and you kind of have, the pedestrian kind of has the right of way. However, if you go to a rural area, if you go even to Maryland, where jaywalking is illegal, it's common sense for them. They don't jaywalk. In New York, anybody just jaywalks and it's not even a problem. So it's kind of what you're exposed to based on where you maybe live. So then there comes beliefs. There's limitations with that, such as in the notes it was talking about, well, sexuality or gender or religion, anything along those lines. Um, your beliefs can definitely impact what you perceive as common sense. So it's common sense, say, in the Catholic religion that they're not very supportive of gay marriage, or that